Let's turn to the situation in the United States, which remains on COVID-19 the epicenter in the world, now with more cases globally than anywhere else, and now more deaths. It's just surpassed China with more than 4,000 deaths. Lindsay Duncombe is our senior Washington editor. And Lindsay, everyone has been, or most people have been commenting on that coronavirus briefing yesterday, and a marked change in tone from the U.S. president, who seems to be taking things very seriously now.
There was absolutely no sugarcoating the reality here. When Donald Trump stepped up to that podium, he had a somber tone. He seemed to really understand what the doctors were saying and the models that they were about to present. In fact, he let them take over much of this marathon 2-hour news conference to really show what the science shows. And what the science shows, Heather, is grim. Even with all of these measures that are taking place, with the economy shut down, the U.S. is looking at essentially a best-case scenario of 100,000 people losing their lives, dying as a result of the coronavirus. And that range goes from 100,000 to 200,000, around there. So certainly this was tough news for the president to deliver. Here's how he did it.
We're going to go through a very tough 2 weeks. And then hopefully, as the experts are predicting, as I think a lot of us are predicting after having studied it so hard, you're going to start seeing some real light at the end of the tunnel. But this is going to be a very painful, very, very painful 2 weeks.
As you mentioned, this is a dramatic shift in tone, because it was just last week, Heather, that Donald Trump sat and told Fox News that he was still using comparisons with respect to the regular flu, and he was musing about opening up the economy by Easter. That's not happening anymore.
Lindsay, look with me, if you will, at New York City. We have this shot that we want to just bring to mind. From the air, you see right there at the base of your screen, USNS Comfort, this enormous hospital ship which arrived in New York Harbor on Monday. They're not treating coronavirus patients there, but this is where they're going to deal with patients who have other medical problems to try to relieve the strain on New York hospitals. Just want to look at that live picture while we have it. Let's talk about New York City and New York State. Within the United States, this is the epicenter in the country.
In New York City now, Heather, there are more than 1,000 people who have died as a result of the coronavirus. And you mentioned the Comfort Hospital. In addition to that, there are now makeshift hospitals or field hospitals in some of the most iconic locations, including the U.S. Open tennis facility that's being built, Central Park. And this is all because of how many sick people there are. In fact, ambulance operators and paramedics say they're getting double the calls they normally would on a regular shift. And here's how they describe it.
It just wears you down, you know. I mean, I've welled up in tears at times, you know, when we take somebody's loved one out of their home. Nobody's allowed to go with the patients as opposed to before. We literally just take their loved ones, and oftentimes we know that they will never see them again alive.
Really difficult days, and many, many more of them to come, because New York City, the United States, has not reached the peak yet. This challenge is just going to get bigger and bigger.
Lindsay, thank you. My goodness, that's very difficult to hear, the separation of loved ones at this time. Thank you, Lindsay Duncombe.